On a housing estate on the eastern edge of Paris, in a working-class suburb called Roissy-en-Brie, there was a boy who did everything with a ball at his feet. He'd play in the courtyards between the tower blocks, on scraps of concrete and worn-down grass, against older kids, against his own two brothers, against anyone who would give him a game. He was the youngest of 3 sons of immigrants from Guinea, raised for most of his childhood by a single mother who worked to keep 3 boys fed, clothed, and out of trouble in a neighborhood where trouble was never far away. There was no money for luxuries, there was football, and there was a mother who decided that football would be the thing that carried her sons somewhere better. That boy is now 32 years old. He has lifted the World Cup. He was once the most expensive footballer who had ever lived. He scored in the final of the biggest game on earth, in front of 100 million people. And for one summer, he was the beating heart of the French national team, the golden boy of a golden generation. And then, over the space of about 2 years, almost all of it was taken from him. His career, his freedom to even step on a pitch, his money, his trust in the people closest to him, including his own brother. His name is Paul Pogba. And this is the story of how a man who had everything watched it slip through his fingers, one disaster at a time. The gun pressed on him in a locked room by people he'd known since childhood, the 13 million euros they demanded, the failed drug test that nearly ended his career for good, the 811 days in the wilderness, and the fragile, uncertain comeback he's fighting for right now. But to understand how a man loses everything, you first have to understand everything he had, and you have to go back to that estate. Paul Labille Pogba was born on the 15th of March, 1993, in Lagny-sur-Marne, just east of Paris. His parents had come to France from Conakry, the capital of Guinea. His 2 older brothers, Florentine and Matthias, are twins, 3 years older than Paul, and here's a small detail that tells you how this family's story was split from the very start. Because Paul was born on French soil, and his brothers were born back in Guinea, the 3 of them grew up eligible for different countries. Florentine and Matthias would both go on to play international football for Guinea. Paul would play for France. Same blood, same estate, same ball in the same courtyard, 3 brothers, 2 nations. When Paul was around 3 years old, his parents separated, and his mother, Yeo Moriba, raised the 3 boys largely on her own. Ask Pogba about the most important person in his life, and the answer has never changed. It's her. She was strict. She kept her sons close and kept them busy. And the thing she kept them busy with was the game. There's a memory Pogba has told and retold, and it's the perfect origin for a boy who'd one day score in a World Cup final. He was 5 years old, in the summer of 1998, when France hosted the World Cup and won it for the first time, beating Brazil in the final in Paris. Pogba remembers watching that final at home, and then the whole neighborhood pouring out into the street afterward. The joy of it. Everybody together. A 5-year-old drinking in the sight of what football could do to an entire country. 20 years later, he'd be the one giving that feeling to France. He started playing organized football at 6 years old in 1999 for the local club, US Roissy-en-Brie, on a modest little pitch not far from home. And this is where he met the man who quietly changed the course of his life. His youth coach there was a man named Sambou Tati, who would later become the president of the club. And Tati noticed something about young Paul. The boy was gifted, obviously, absurdly gifted, but he had one glaring flaw. He loved the ball too much. He would get it, and he would dribble and dribble and dribble because he simply did not want to give it up. He was playing as a forward, a striker, chasing goals and glory the way every kid does. So, Tati made a decision. He moved him back. He turned the ball-hogging little striker into a midfielder, a player who would have to see the whole pitch, who would have to give the ball and get it back, who would sit at the center of everything. Think about that for a second. One of the most complete midfielders of his entire generation, a 6'3" engine of power and grace who would one day run the middle of a World Cup final, was, as a small boy, a dribbler who would not pass, gently pushed into the role that would define him by a coach at a tiny amateur club. And Tati remembers something else too. He remembers that Paul, even as a kid, hated to lose. When he lost, he would cry. That's the raw material a champion is made of. Totti set up his next move, a trial at another local club, US Torcy, where Pogba went at 13 and captained the under-13s. And years later, when Pogba became the most expensive footballer on the planet, those two tiny amateur clubs, Roissy and Torcy, received a share of the fee under FIFA's rules for the clubs that develop a player, 300,000 euros, split between them. For a club like Roissy, running on a budget of around 50,000 euros a year, it was a fortune that fell from the sky, the return, decades later, on a barefoot kid nobody outside the neighborhood had ever heard of. At 14, the dream got serious and it got hard. Pogba earned a place at the Academy of Le Havre, one of France's great old football schools, up on the Normandy coast. That meant leaving home. It meant leaving his mother and his brothers and moving into a dormitory hundreds of kilometers away. A boy living among other boys who were all chasing the same impossible odds. He captained their youth side, he stood out, and at just 16, the Giants came calling. In 2009, Manchester United signed him for their academy, and it was messy. Le Havre accused United of poaching their prized teenager, of breaking an agreement. United denied it. FIFA eventually cleared them. But it set a pattern that would follow Pogba his whole career. Wherever he went, controversy and money and headlines came with him. He tore up United's youth and reserve teams, but under Sir Alex Ferguson he barely played. 7 senior appearances, never a Premier League start. Frustrated, feeling the club didn't value him, he did something that United would regret for years. In 2012, on a free transfer, for nothing, he walked away to Juventus. And in Italy, Paul Pogba became a superstar. 4 Serie A titles in a row, cup after cup. He won the Golden Boy Award as the best young player in Europe. He reached a Champions League final. He grew into one of the most coveted midfielders in the world, powerful, elegant, a highlight reel with a personality to match. And Manchester United, the club that had let him leave for free, watched him blossom into exactly the player they wished they'd kept. So, they bought him back. In August 2016, United paid Juventus a world record fee to bring Pogba home, around 105 million euros, more than any club had ever paid for any footballer. The message was as loud as the price tag. This was the man they would build the next decade around. This was the face of the club. At 23 years old, Paul Pogba was the most expensive footballer in the history of the sport. And then came the summit, the summer of 2018, the World Cup in Russia. France had a young, ferocious, ridiculously talented team, and Pogba was its midfield engine. They marched to the final in Moscow against Croatia, in front of nearly 80,000 people in the stadium and a global audience in the hundreds of millions. And in the second half, with France in control, Pogba struck. His first shot was blocked, but the ball fell back to him, and he lashed it low, left-footed, into the corner, 3-1. He became the first Manchester United player ever to score in a World Cup final. France won 4-2, and Paul Pogba, the kid from the Roissy estate who had watched France win it all when he was 5, climbed the steps to lift the trophy and shared the moment with his mother and his brother. That was the top of the mountain. A World Cup winner, a world record man, 25 years old, with the world at his feet. And this is as good as it would ever get, because everything after this is the fall. The first crack came from inside his own body. Pogba returned to Juventus in 2022, hoping to relaunch his career, and almost immediately tore the meniscus in his right knee. The club tried to avoid surgery. It didn't work. He went under the knife that September, and the recovery dragged on, past every deadline they set. And so, on Halloween of 2022, came the gut punch. Paul Pogba would miss the World Cup. His agent said that if wishful thinking could change things, he'd be playing tomorrow. But it couldn't, and France went all the way to the final in Qatar without him, losing on penalties to Argentina in one of the greatest finals ever played, while the man who had scored in the last one watched from the outside. He hasn't played for France since. But the injury, as cruel as it was the least of it, because rewind a few months to March 2022, and something far darker had already happened. Pogba said he was lured by childhood friends to a place in the Paris suburbs, and there, in a room, 2 hooded men armed with rifles were waiting for him. They held him at gunpoint. and they demanded 13 million euros, claiming, in a grotesque logic, that he owed them, that he should have taken care of them financially, that this was payment for a lifetime of so-called loyalty, stretching back to when they were all kids together. Pogba said he handed over 100,000 euros to the group. And then it got worse because it got personal. The whole thing exploded into public view months later when his own older brother, Matthias, posted videos online promising explosive revelations about Paul. Among the accusations that came flying out was one so strange it barely sounded real, a claim that Paul had paid a witch doctor to cast a spell on his own France and Paris teammate, Kylian Mbappé. Pogba flatly denied it, but the damage was done. His most private nightmare was now a global spectacle, and his own brother was standing on the other side of it. The case went to trial in Paris, and in December 2024, the verdict landed. 6 men were convicted. The man considered the mastermind was sentenced to 8 years in prison. And Matthias Pogba, Paul's own brother, was handed a 3-year sentence, 2 of them suspended, to serve the rest under electronic monitoring. Paul didn't attend. Afterward, he said there was no winner in a case that involved members of his own family and people he'd known since he was a child. He said he could finally turn the page. Except there was one more blow still to come, and this one would take the game itself away from him. Back in August 2023, after a Juventus match he had not even played in, Pogba was picked for a random drug test. It came back positive for a substance that raises testosterone. A second sample confirmed it. He was suspended, and in early 2024, he was handed the maximum penalty, a 4-year ban. For a 30-year-old with a history of injuries, 4 years was not a suspension. It was, in all likelihood, the end. Pogba said he was heartbroken. He insisted he had never knowingly cheated, that it came from a supplement he had been given by a doctor. "I'm not a cheater," he said, and he appealed to the highest court in sport. He won a lifeline. In October 2024, the ban was cut from 4 years to 18 months. Pogba said, simply, that the nightmare was over. He would be free to play again in March 2025. But by then the damage was total. Juventus had already moved on, and the 2 sides tore up his contract. Read that back. The world record man. The World Cup winner. The most expensive footballer who had ever lived, now unemployed, unable to play, his name attached to a doping ban in a courtroom, his brother convicted, his best years gone. That is what losing everything actually looks like. So, where does a story like that go next? For Pogba, it went to the south of France. In the summer of 2025, AS Monaco took a chance and signed him, a free agent, on a 2-year deal. For the first time in his entire professional career, Paul Pogba would play club football in his home country. And at the press conference to announce it, this man who had been to the very top of the sport broke down and cried. He said everything came flooding back to him in that moment. The doping, the injuries, all of it, and he could not hold it in. But redemption does not run on a schedule. The injuries kept coming, an ankle problem, a calf. The comeback kept getting pushed back. And when it finally arrived, in November 2025, it was quiet and it was humbling. He came on in the 85th minute, with his team already losing 4-1 and down to 10 men, away at Rennes. It had been 811 days since his last competitive appearance. 2 years and more of his prime, simply gone. He touched the ball a handful of times. And the traveling fans stood and gave him an ovation anyway, because whatever else he'd become, he was still Paul Pogba, and he was still standing. "Football," he said afterward, "isn't over for me." But the road since has been just as hard. As of the start of 2026, he's managed only around 30 minutes across 3 brief appearances before another calf injury knocked him back down again. He still talks about the dream, a return to the France squad, a place at the 2026 World Cup. Though he knows, and he said it, that if he can't perform for Monaco, he can forget about France entirely. It might be too much to ask. His body might not allow it. The dream might already be gone. So, what did Paul Pogba actually lose? He lost the money he handed over in a locked room. He lost his trust in the people closest to him, his own brother among them. He lost 2 full years of a career that was already running short on time. He lost the aura, the invincibility, the sense that the game would always be there waiting for him whenever he was ready to come back. But here's the thing about a fall this steep. He hasn't stopped getting up. Whatever you make of him, the talent, the controversy, the wasted years, the man who once had everything and watched it disappear one disaster at a time is still out there lacing up his boots, still chasing the ghost of the boy who lifted a World Cup in the Moscow rain. Maybe that story is over, or maybe the last chapter hasn't been written yet. What do you think? Is there still a comeback left in Paul Pogba? Let me know down below.